guiding principles. That's where we may have different discipline or discipline concerns or behaviors that may not be fulfilling the expectation that we have. And so everything is around those three guiding principles. So when we look at being safe, respectful, and responsible, that includes areas that are in our common spaces as it relates to the building, such as the hallways, cafeteria, recess, and also includes those expectations that we are expecting as a campus within the classroom. So when students are not displaying those characteristics or those traits, then we start to look at are those behaviors that are a result of not following these expectations, are they disruptive or are they non-disruptive in a sense? So what you see on the screen here is kind of a general matrix that we use on our campus as it relates to teaching into those guiding principles for our students. So as a process of one of our acknowledgement processes that we use here to help encourage students exhibiting the appropriate behaviors or being safe, respectful, or responsible, you may have heard we use our acknowledgement tool that we use are trailblazer tickets. And so when we see students that are exhibiting those different guiding principles, we want to acknowledge them for representing that. And so ultimately, what we try to do is build into a community of students contributing to the overall community as the campus. And so once students earn Trailblazer tickets, they can start to earn them as their class. And we have what we call a Trailblazer chart where we track those Trailblazer tickets with our students. And once they complete their chart, there's a couple of things. There may be some incentives that the teacher within the classroom might have built within their class that they're able to acknowledge when students are doing the right thing. But when they fill up those trackers, then they go into our school-wide tracker, and then we have different incentives as a campus-wide, i.e. the messages that you get about the pajama days, and different events that we have here. So for this last filling up that chart as a campus, we're working on a school-wide dance for the kids because we want to acknowledge those students that are doing the right thing, and we want to encourage them to continue that process. So here on our campus, to support all of that, we have what we call the MTSS structure or framework, or multi-tiered systems of support. And so what that means simply is that we have a system that is campus-wide that we look at how are we supporting our students academically, how are we supporting them socially and emotionally, and how are we supporting behavior, so that it is an overall that we're making sure that we're providing supports for the whole child and not necessarily just certain aspects. So meaning that we're not just focused on academics, or we're not just focused on social emotional, but we're looking at the whole child in its entirety and what supports they may need. And so when we look at the MTSS framework also, we kind of structure that in a way of where we kind of separate into 3 tiers when we're talking about those supports. We have what we call our tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And all that simply means is when we're looking at tier 1, what supports are we providing for all students, right? There may be, what are all supports that we're doing for all students? And then we have tier 2, which is a subset of that may be students that it doesn't pertain to all of the students, but may need a little bit support. And then who are those that may need some more intense support? And so that carries itself over from academic as well as behavior. So just want to kind of give you a little breakdown as it relates to that when we look at academics or behavior in our response to those students, depending on where they may fall in that trajectory. So when we look at those supports, again, we say tier 1 is something that everyone receives. And so if we're looking at specific, and today we're specifically talking about behavior. So when we talk about tier one and problem solving or supporting students, that tier one level of support comes from the teacher and parents. And basically what that means is that if students are not displaying the appropriate behavior or if there's behaviors, then we try to provide interventions or provide incentives for students on the most basic level, which is the tier one level, which is with our teacher. And so there might be instances where there might be behavior, but there might be minor behaviors that may not be disruptive. For instance, student breaking their pencil or a student talking in class. Those are some of the things that we consider there might be teacher managed type behaviors that I can correct, which may simply be a conversation with the student, might be a loss of privilege, might be a conference with parents. And so we talk about our tier one, and how are we supporting students with that? We also have what is known as our care team, which is a group of members, which I see there are some members online. I believe Mr. Prater is here. I know Ms. Holtz was here as well, but represents different facets of support on our campus, including counseling services, our social work. We have admin and also teachers that are on that committee as well, where we look at our campus-wide systems that we have in supporting students, whether it relates to behavior or incentives on campus. So we start to look at the campus as a whole. What are those supports? If there's some areas that are concerned system or campus-wide, then we start to discuss those and see what interventions or what supports we can put in place to help support our students. And our care team typically meets at least once a month, but right now we are meeting a little bit more frequently than that. So we're meeting like every two to 3 weeks, just to review where we are. Are there particular concerns as it relates to behavior? Are there particular students, or is it something that's related to a system-wide structure, such as if we're seeing some discipline things in the hallway when we're walking, do we need to review those procedures? What are our procedures and routines as it relates to the hallways to perhaps prevent or be proactive in whatever that discipline concern is that we have? So when we move from tier one, we also have tier two, and this is when we start to look at, are there any individual students who might need a little bit more support that is other than just a simple redirection in class for whatever that reason may be. But some of the supports that we have for that is our behavior interventionists that we have on campus, which can provide support to the student as well as the teacher, which means coming in at times maybe just observing the student or observing the environment to see what may be happening, to see if there's some larger scale supports that may be needed, or if there's something just specific to that particular student that may be having any kind of discipline or behavior concerns, as well as the administrative team. If there is yes, and I do. And Ms. Smart is our behavior interventionist on campus. Thank you for that, Jill. But then also we have our student support team. So to give an example for that, I'm gonna use myself as an example. Carl is having concerns. Well, Carl is I'm maybe continuously out of my seat. And when I'm out of my seat, I'm getting other students off task because I continue talking with them, or I want to play with them, or different things like that. And so at that point in time, the teacher may have provided some different interventions for Carl, different things to work to get Carl back on track. But for whatever reason, those interventions are things that I may have done, and I've also talked with the parent, I may not have been successful with that. So a teacher can bring that particular concern and refer them to our SST team, which is our student support team. And all that is to submit that, hey, I have a concern with this particular student. This is what the concern is. And then as a team, the support team is made up of the teacher. It could be counselor, it could be social worker, it could be behavior interventionist, and as a team, and also the parent. And as a team, we sit and we discuss what are the behavior or what are the concerns that we have. And at that point in time, simply as a team together, we work to problem solve beyond what the teacher may have already tried in the classroom. And so we try to come up with interventions at that particular time. And what we do is we progress monitor from that point. The other tier is our tier 3, and there may be some students that may have some more intense supports that they may need, and they may be in some type of special program. Example, they might follow under special education, might be 504, might be some different things where they also are working with a case manager. And typically that case manager is, i.e., maybe one of our SPED teachers, or those that are, or that person that's responsible for their working with their ARD and their IEPs, or their behavior intervention plans that they may have a part of the special education program. And so those are kind of our different tiers. So I kind of wanted to talk about that to kind of give some context as we go a little further in talking about specific behavior concerns and then how those are addressed here on campus. So we kind of started out with an overview of what we do for everyone, and then what are those supports at those different levels. Okay, so when we talk about behaviors here on campus, and I apologize first of all for kind of going fast because I know we're kind of on a time here. But when we look at behaviors here on campus, we pretty much divide them into 2 major categories, and that's minor behaviors and then major behaviors. Within the minor behaviors, we further sort them into 2 categories, which is either non-disruptive or what we consider that may be disruptive. And so here on the slide that you can see, there's a couple of examples, but not limited to these that are on the screen. So when we talk about minor behaviors, typically those are behaviors that we consider to be what we call teacher managed behaviors. Does that make sense? So when we talk about teacher managed behaviors, there may be things like a student being tardy, or getting to the location that they're supposed to be late. Maybe a student out of their seat, not completing their homework, their classwork, or just simply off task. At this moment, when it's non-disruptive, it means that I'm displaying these type of behaviors, but I'm not disrupting the learning environment that's happening. It's just simply Carl not completing his assignment, or I'm out of the seat. These are things that teachers can, that a teacher can manage. And so what that means is that the teacher may give the student a consequence. Consequence might be contacting parent, letting the parent know what's happening, intervening there. It may be the student missing out on a preferred activity for a short period of time to complete the assignment, maybe that Carl didn't complete. So there could be a variety of things there. When we talk about disruptive in the classroom, it could be a teacher managed behavior depending on how often it's occurring. So it could be Carl blurting out and teachers teaching, I'm blurting out an answer or whatnot. While it's disruptive, it may be something that the teacher can handle with just a simple redirection. Carl, remember, what are we supposed to do when we want to respond? We raise our hand or what have you. So a teacher can talk through that with the student, and maybe that one redirection, the student gets back on track, right? Could be the student, I'm in a hurry to get to line up and I ran to the door rather than walking to the door and get in line. So depending on the circumstance, it could be a minor or it could be a major. It just kind of look in the context of what actually occurred at that moment. So with that, a consequence might be communication home. Talk to mom, say, hey, mom, Carl is having trouble. Every time we line up, he knows the routine, but he's constantly running to get in line. My concern is he may trip, he may fall, he may hurt himself, or he may run into someone. So that may be something that can be easily managed. with the teacher and the parent conversation. Now, if it becomes a point that is repetitive and it continues, right? So we start to work on some different interventions to try to work on that. So it may be we maybe change our way in which we line up. Students may line up by line order, different things like that. When we look at our major behaviors, we kind of categorize those into what we consider either escalated or crisis. Escalated could possibly be I'm using inappropriate language towards another student, or I'm using inappropriate language towards the adult in the classroom. The major behaviors is often what we consider what we say are office managed behaviors. That means that a teacher is calling the office and I might need an administrator or I need some support or assistance in handling the situation with the student. Could be a student stealing, different things. Now, some of these could be things that could be managed by the teacher. It just depends on the scale of what's happening in the context. A crisis may be what we know a fight or a student threatening physical aggression towards another student, or may be possible a self-harm situation. So those are our basic categories that we look at when we're talking about behaviors on campus. So from there, when we start to look at our behaviors, we start to, and on this screen here, I have a couple of more examples of what behaviors may necessarily fall into specific categories. Those that are classroom managed behaviors, what are those may be a referral to our behavior SST team or SPED, depending on the behavior, and then what are office managed behaviors in the classroom. So I think everybody pretty much probably has an idea of what our classroom managed behaviors. So when we talk about behavior referrals to our SST process, this is when we start to talk about behaviors that might be more major and there may be more persistence within the classroom or that we've seen. So what typically happens if there is, I'm going to just use an example that is there, persistent property damage. That means maybe I've broken a computer, I might damage somebody else's materials, any type of campus things. So before we start to we look at the behavior, what is happening, but then we also get context behind it. So as an administrator, when we have those particular behaviors, of course, we go into our questioning mode, one, talking with the students about the behavior, and then we try to get some context as to what's happening. And so that means include talking with the student and talking with the teacher. And so we start to look at, is this something that is consistent? Is this something that is persistent? We also have parents that are involved in that. From there, we also look at the student themselves because we have some students that may have additional supports as it relates to a behavior intervention plan, different things like that. So we start to look at that, look at the behavior, and then we determine whether there's a consequence or not, or how we handle the situation, so to speak. There are some students that do have some specific supports that are needed, depending due to if they may have a disability or not. And so from there, we start to look at the behavior also to see if it's a function of their actual disability. And if the behavior is a function of their disability, there are consequences that are given, but they may look different depending on what those supports that may be in place for that particular student. And then we go from there to assign the particular consequences for that. If you look in the third column for the office managed behaviors, there are some of the same things, such as your fighting or physical aggression. Of course, for all students in a situation where all students that come and there's a discipline infraction, we make sure that we give those students their due process. And what that means is that we're talking to the students, we're getting context of what's happening, and we investigate to see what actually occurred. And from that moment, depending on what happened, those consequences, we also do align. Well, I see in the chat as well. Joanna's online as well, which is a part of our team, and also Wendy is here on part of the team. Feel free to jump in at any time if, to add to as well. But depending on those particular students, whether they have an individual education plan and or BIP, we follow that particular plan for that particular student, and then we move forward. Within that process, we work with the parents as well, as we're working on either the, as we're going through the consequences and also the follow-up from that as well. So with all of that, we align our processes and procedures with the district student code of conduct, which is also available on the district website. So you can simply just, you can search for it there and see more information as it relates to. It's available for all persons on the district website.
To kind of go off of something that Dr. Unger was mentioning specifically on page 11, to kind of touch on those consequences and that behavior of students with disabilities, like he was mentioning, we have to first look at the behavior, look at their disability, look at their plan specifically, and see, is this plan, are we going to follow the discipline and the consequence within the law? Because we have to keep in mind that the student does have a disability, and we have to keep in mind that some of the behavior may be a result of that disability. So it is federal guideline that we follow those guidelines for us to be able to assign a consequence based on what the student's IEP, the individualized educational plan, and if they have a behavior intervention plan too. We have to look at what supports are there and how we can move forward from there. Not some of the same consequences that you might see for a student without an IEP, we cannot apply them for specific students that have an IEP or a 504 plan as well.
I also want to add that just because a student has a behavior intervention plan or has an IEP, that doesn't mean that nothing happens. And I know sometimes it might feel that way. It's just that we have to acknowledge and understand that the student has a disability and these behaviors are impacted by them. And we always kind of focus on that instructional approach. So what supports are we providing? Do we need to come together as a staff and problem solve about this student? Do we need to work with their special education services to maybe provide more minutes, to provide more social skills? But consequences are given, they're documented, they are provided. I also want to say that a lot of times, we also are kind of bound by a couple of laws too. Like, for instance, you can't suspend students who are below second grade. That's a general, or who are in second grade or younger. With students who are in special education, whether they have a behavior intervention plan or not, they can't be removed from their educational setting for 10 days, more than 10 days every year. So that could mean that, let's say a student with an IEP, even if it's for a math learning disability, we can't just say, okay, we're going to suspend the student for 10 days or send the DAEP for 15 days. The law is telling us the student has a disability. We have to provide the support to help the student improve in those goals and improve in those behaviors. So the burden is on us. So I just wanted to provide some clarity there.
Yeah.
And as far as for student being removed from school, I kind of touched on that. We do have, we have to address each situation individually. And oftentimes we can hear that a student did something, but when we get that context through our investigation, there's more context. And so we might do a full day suspension or full day detention, or you might do an out of school suspension or in school suspension, which are all things that we've done. Just know that as far as out of school suspension, it's very, we're, one, we can only do it for students who are in third grade or higher. And so there's just not a lot of suspensions that are happening in general. And also we know that, or understand that students need to be in school. So our goal is always to try to do the least restrictive. And so what can we do so the student still has access to their educational environment while ensuring or trying to ensure the safety of as many people as possible, our students and our staff especially.
Right, and sorry, as Joanna was speaking, I was looking at a couple of things that were in the chat as well. And so one of the things that were mentioned about repeated tier 2 and tier 3 behaviors and resources or persons not always available or specifically staffing. What I can tell you in regards to specifically special education is that we have had some vacancies, which well, we've had several vacancies as it relates to positions, but as of recently, we've filled those vacancies. Well, we've recommended persons for those positions, and then right now they're with human resources in process. And so where we did have about, we had 2 openings where we have a total of, in our general resource inclusion, we have 4 teachers where we had 2 vacancies. So we have since filled sent a recommendation for those positions. They haven't started yet. What we do expect them to start very soon while they're being processed through human resources.
One of the things that's on the screen right now is just talking about bus consequences. We do have a role in that as well when it comes to transportation. This is coming straight from the student code of conduct and kind of just reviewing what that bus process is. One thing that we remind the parents, and there has been several communications sent out this year regarding bus safety, bus regulations, and making sure that the students are following them. One part of it is just going over the consequences too, and this is something that we wanted to share where within the first report, the student is given a warning by the principal, and the report usually comes with footage from the bus and a referral from the bus driver. And from there, once we see what was going on, if there's a second incident when it comes to the bus, they are removed from transportation for 3 days. Then it escalates for the third report to 10 days. The fourth report is that the student gets removed from the bus for the rest of the semester. And the fifth one is that they lose their riding privileges for the remainder of the year. So this is something that we are currently working on with transportation as well. We are trying to make sure that all of our students are getting home safe and coming to school safe and following this specifically that comes from transportation. I know we've gotten several questions as to what this process was and what our consequences are for these specific bus incidents or bus infractions, and this is what the district has shared with us, and this is what we're following currently.
And also to follow up on that, specifically to touch back on the topic of those students that are under third grade, that may have a particular behavior that may result in a physical aggression towards a student. Those students can be suspended, but what that suspension looks like is an in-school suspension, not out-of-school suspension. So there is a loss of privilege, and there are consequences that are for those particular students. But what it looks like may look different than an out-of-school suspension. Go right up. Yeah. Yeah, so I do want to be clear on that. So even though there is an out-of-school suspension for students that may be under third grade, there are consequences, and suspension may happen, but what that may look like is an in-school suspension, which means that they're removed from their classroom environment and they're placed into another environment so that learning can continue. But at the same time, those students are having those consequences as well. And so within that process, with that in-school suspension, there's other processes that are taking place, such as reteaching of replacement behavior, and within that process. So I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that a student who is under third grade, that there isn't any consequence or there isn't a suspension. It's just that the suspension is an in-school suspension, which means they come to school as normal, but they're in a different environment than their regular classroom. All right, so I know that we are over time a little bit, and I know that persons might have things that they need to do. So I can answer maybe one or two questions before we leave for the night. And before we do that, if there was anything that Joanna, if you wanted to add, or Wendy, and I know that was a short and brief, but hopefully that gives a little bit more insight in how discipline is handled or worked here on campus.
I just want to add, it's not pretty. It's a very hard process, and we're coming a long way. We're trying to every day. We understand and know there are gaps in our system, and we're actively trying to repair those. Just recently, all of the teachers completed a universal behavior screener, which is just an assessment of all students on campus. And from that, we got results of how students rated, like low risk, medium risk, high risk in terms of behavior. And we found out it's just 54 students on campus that were in that high risk category. Tomorrow, each grade level team is meeting in behavior SSTs to go through each one of those students and say, do we have a plan for this student? What are we doing? Do they need a crisis plan or a safety plan? If we're having any of these physical aggression issues with any type of consistency, what are we doing? Again, like I said, that burden's on us. And then if we need to have more intense meetings on individual students or with the counselor, with our social work, with everybody, we're going to do those things. Trying to get better with our discipline referral system as well, trying to get those processed within the 24, 48 hours, having a clear consequence, notifying those parents. Our response team is amazing. Some of those people are there whenever there's a 1400 call. They're there. Lindsay has the most amazing tracking system. We're tracking dozens of calls every day. Trying to get that number down. But even with that, there are things that we miss. When we have a certain number of referrals a day, it's hard to stay on top of them. Again, those staffing holes, just improvement in our system, improving our skill set as a whole, whether it's with our teachers, our leadership team, our SPED team, all of those things that we're trying to do. We ask you to continue to advocate for your students, for you, for the campus. But please, I love how Jill said at the beginning, trying to move towards just a compassionate, move towards compassion with this, because it's not easy work. And, we are thinking about all of our students, and even these students who do these behaviors, it's still our responsibility, our moral obligation to make sure that we're also doing what we can to have that instructional approach towards the behaviors as well. And what can we do to help these behaviors improve? And we know the research says that consequences don't help in the way that it gives that teacher a break, gives the students some safety, some freedom from having that happen. But we know that especially for our students, like I said, those 54, consequences aren't really what's going to help. It's going to be those plans. It's going to be the coming together, the working together as a community to really help each of those students. So that's where we are now. If we really want to see an improvement in behavior, that's where we have to start.
Right. And thank you, Joanna, for that. And a couple of things I do want to address, Ms. Mouton, as well, which is, we know that we have a lot of parents, and we definitely welcome that volunteer here on campus. And so this was a really good question as it relates to if you happen to be on campus and you're volunteering, you see a major behavior situation that is occurring, for that volunteer, we do ask that hopefully there is another staff member that is available, that you definitely notify that staff member so that they can get involved in the situation. If there is a student that is doing something that they shouldn't, it is okay to say, can you please stop, or something to that nature. We do ask that you don't necessarily intervene, as it, let's just say if there was a fight or something, that you do not try to separate them yourself. Simply, you may be able to try to redirect them verbally, but hopefully that there is a staff member that is in nearby to inform them so that they can intervene in that particular situation. What I can tell you, parents, we definitely appreciate your support here on campus, and in being partners with us in working through this process. This is my second year here, and like I tell you all the time, I don't know a more supportive group that is here and supporting our campus and our staff. And definitely we appreciate your feedback as we are continuously to grow our campus and to make things better. What I can say is that we're not perfect right now. We do have some areas that we're working on and continuously working on. But what I can tell you, looking overall, campus overall, from the time that I started last year and also talking with previous administrator, we're definitely moving in the right direction. And so with that being said, some of those behaviors that may have existed in the past, we're working really hard, as Joanna stated, and working with our parents and working with our teachers to provide the appropriate supports for those students so that they are improving in that area. And again, we definitely can't do it without you. So definitely appreciate all the support coming in and volunteering and just supporting our students on their day-to-day needs. And so just even this forum coming in to just talk and have that discussion, one, for clarity and just seeking to understand what's happening so that we can better support all of our kids, I think are major wins with us. So I definitely appreciate you. Any concerns that you have, definitely let us know, or questions that you may have, so that we can work through this together as we support our students.
Thank you guys so much for presenting on this information. I do have, if you can stop presenting, Dr. Unger, I do have one slide to share.
Does it still show presenting on your end?
Oh, maybe not. Okay, sorry.
Okay. Maybe it got stuck there.
I am new to this. I'm so sorry. Okay. Hold on right here. If you're looking for ways to help, can you guys see this slide? I don't know if it's happening yet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. If you are looking for ways to help, here are 5 things that I would just suggest. I've been on this campus for about 6 or 7 years, actually 7. So due to the challenges our campus faces, and this is a really challenging topic, and we are, we're faced with new challenges all the time between turnover or staff shortages or COVID. This is a really challenging topic. So the first thing I just have is what I've already mentioned, just moving forward with compassion and understanding, knowing that every situation is different and often really complicated. The public school system advocates for every child in every classroom, and so does PTA. If you look down at the very bottom of the slide in the left-hand corner, every child, one voice is something that our Texas PTA and National PTA is a big part of their organization, making sure that those kids who do have challenges in their behavior are being cared for and have access to education, as well as all the other kids in the classroom. And that does get complicated when we're talking about disruptive behaviors and harmful behaviors, and making sure our teachers stay safe too. So just know that it's complicated, and just encourage you as parents. I've been frustrated with these issues as well on campus. That was a big goal for me as president, was to start this dialogue. And so I'm really thankful that our admin has engaged in this conversation with us and is working to inform us. So please know I just say that as a concerned parent myself. And then number two, this is an idea that's very fresh and new. I just had a meeting about it this week with Miss Ward, who is one of our counselors, along with Miss Hulse. But she is taking steps to provide a sanctuary room on our campus. It's going to be located in our kindergarten wing, where when a class has to evacuate, they have a safe place to evacuate, and Miss Ward is planning to be there to help any kids who may have experienced trauma or stress maybe as it relates to the behavioral incident in their classroom. So this is something that we're working on, but it is a piece to not just address the behavioral incident of the child and that child, but the other children in the classroom as well. So know that we are working on taking steps towards caring for every student in the classroom. Number three, I believe the school sent this out a week or two ago. We'll send out another link in our recap tomorrow. But we have a reporting procedure that's been outlined and approved by admin and sent out by admin that just helps us kind of streamline the communication, so that we're giving teachers the opportunity to respond and giving them time to respond when it's reasonable to. So we will be sending that out again tomorrow. I want to encourage all of you as parents to follow that as much as is possible. Obviously, there's going to be emergencies, and that's not what this applies to, but just want to encourage you to follow that procedure. And then number four, get involved. A lot of our parents are concerned about this issue because we're being able to be back on campus again, and we're able to see things, and we have questions, and this is how we get to know our campus, is by being up at the school, and not just being up at the school to have eyes, but to also be supportive to our teachers. They are the ones that are facing these challenges every day, and PTA works really hard to support that T in PTA, the teachers that are at our school. They are the ones that are taking care of our students and educating our students and loving and serving them the best way that they know how with the class that they have. And so PTA is a great way to get involved and get in the classroom and show support for those teachers. And then the last one, number five, we have counselors at our school that are wonderful. Miss Hulse and Miss Ward are both amazing, and they work really hard at our school. But please reach out to them if you have a kiddo that's been affected or has a really challenging situation that they're walking through. They are a great resource on campus. One more slide I'm going to add, just because I think it's helpful to have a face with a name. This was a slide I prepared earlier, but we didn't really get to it. But this is Miss Lindsay Smart. She is our behavior interventionist and also our designated campus behavior coordinator. I just want you to know her job at our campus is to help with some of these tier 2, tier 3 behaviors that Dr. Unger discussed. So her email is on the school website. Please reach out to her if you have questions as well. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
So before we go, Jill, can I ask a clarifying question for Jennifer? There was a question that asked about
what is or where can we find the approved reporting procedure for incidents?
Yes, I just had a question. Were you speaking specifically if I had a concern about my child and I need to talk with someone, or specifically if I'm volunteering on campus and I see something and I need to report that?
So here's the document. If you can see it, I'm going to try to open it here. But this Jolie Johnson communication between families and admin, can you guys?
Okay. Yeah, so what I wanted to add to that, even though we sent that out, if you happen to be on campus and there's something that you witnessed, then we have some statement forms in our office. You would simply come to the office and you can write down the statement of what it is that you observed or, occurred, so that we can address it. That's if you're actually on campus. And you witness something or whatnot, by all means, definitely report it to a staff member. Okay, I see, Jennifer. If if you see a staff member, definitely report it to the staff member. But there are some statement forms in the office. You can also write down what it is that you witnessed or observed there, and Jessica would get it to the appropriate person to address. Thank you. That was a good question.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us. We did record tonight's meeting and we'll send it out in our recap email tomorrow. And thanks everybody for coming. Please reach out if you have any questions about PTA or about school. PTA is a great place to ask questions, and relying on the experience of many of our parents that have been here for a while.
Thank you. Good night.